Carl here from Games, Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for sure, and it's 31 days of Halloween. Taking us nostalgia goggles off, this time for Braindead AKA Dead Alive. For those of other territories, we know it. I know it as Braindead, but also very familiar with it as Dead Alive as well. Of course, famously one of Peter Jackson's earliest movies, pre-Lord of the Rings fames and all of that stuff. There's a, not pointless, but a question for you in a pub quiz. What was Peter Jackson's earlier movies called? Here's one of them. Braindead AKA Dead Alive. A movie that as a child, and reliving it now, you can see easily, I can see completely why my child self fell in love with this movie, was so heavily entertained by this movie. From the slapstick comedy to the over-the-top violence and gore to the insanity of it all. Everything about it is a vivid, vitality-filled freak show of an experience. It is easily watchable from all of that because of how frantic it moves, how over the top it is, how gross it is, all of that stuff that will entertain a youngster. Hell, it reminds me at times to things like game shows that I watched when I was a kid, your fun houses and all that, involved Nickelodeon with gunk and all of that, because that is effectively what it's doing, just a very adult version of it. It's gunk, but it's not green, it's blood and it's guts and it's all of that. So rewatching this, there's no part of me that thinks my childhood self was wrong. But, and this is where it gets interesting. I know that a lot of people have a lot of love for this film, and I really do like it. But I never felt, particularly when I watched it when I was older and moving into this territory, having watched it again recently, I never felt that I loved it. I enjoyed it, and I could watch it now as an adult and be amused and entertained by a lot of it. But a lot of the stuff that I thought once upon a time was excellent, I watch now and I'm like, and a really good example of that, right? And I found myself almost cringing during it, but obviously it's where Lionel takes the baby in the pushchair out for the day or the morning in the park, and the silliness of all of that. I found that excruciating to watch as an adult now, but I know kid me would have been laughing away about the whole nonsensical of it and stuff like that. Now I do think there's an argument to say a sequence like that is just take a breath, you know, enjoy this sort of very silly slapstickness, because in a bit it's going to get crazy with the gore and all of that. Let's not forget that Braindead's gore is always done in a comedic way as well. Of course, I would have mentioned it as well, but obviously it's heavily designed to gross you out. And obviously elements like that really had an effect on me as a child. But certainly I sometimes think have a bigger effect on me as an adult. Weirdly, I find myself more grossed out with elements of Braindead now than I did back then, even though it is a similar feeling and vibe. You know, you're talking about the custard eating scene, or just the pus and the constant explosion of bits and gross and things are falling off and being chewed on and all of that. It's all because of how it's filmed and the style and how well the effects hold up. I take all of it in very, all of it is gross to me. This is a gross movie. That's the whole thing. And it's not just the gore and all of that, but it's how the actual characters are filmed, the way the cameras used it to kind of get up close and see the worst in people, to how everyone behaves and treats each other. It's just a bit of a gross film. In fact, there's elements of it I think that are really kind of depressing from a deeper perspective, if you were to kind of look at it that way, where just everyone is horrible, barring, say, Lionel and Paquita. Everyone is just horrible, and it really makes it difficult to watch when everyone is that bad. And I certainly didn't really fully connect with that as a youngster, whereas now watching it was like, oh, this is horrible, can't they all just die or disappear or just shut up, because of course even the voices and things like that are obnoxious as hell. Obviously this is all planned, this is not an accident, but it doesn't always make for the most enjoyable watch now, I find. Everything I think as well kind of is ramping up for the last 20 minutes of this film. I never really noticed that as a youngster. My memories of this was that it was quite consistent all the way through at a certain level, but really it's not. It is a full-on peaks and valleys kind of experience until it hits this last 20 minutes and then just goes batshit crazy. There are so many sections from the last 20 minutes and the entire craziness at the party and the murder and the death and the destruction, all of that sort of stand out. One that I always kind of remember is the dude getting his ribcage pulled out from him underneath the door. For some reason that one always sticks out on me more than anything else. Plus the sight of Lionel's mum's massive boobs when she's a giant monster at the end. I really never liked that as well, and I think it's really stupid now too. There's so much of this that I watch now and I think, God, this must capture this period specifically for like New Zealand and all of that. If you sort of live in that culture and you live in that time, like the way when I see a sort of British movie or an Irish film or an American film of a certain period of time, because of my age and what I grew up around, I can go, my God, doesn't that date? I always wonder if this film must feel very much the case for those from that part of the world, particularly because you can see a lot more of it in this film. That's really something I quite enjoyed when I rewatched it this time. Sort of looking at the things almost looking at the backgrounds of the movie rather than the things that are in the foreground. Do you ever find yourself doing that when you've seen something so much that you're like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be focusing on these two characters here, but let me look at what's going on around it, because I've seen this movie X amount of times and I know exactly what they're going to do and what they're going to say, but let me see if there's something I've missed before. And I found that more fascinating. I found myself taking it a bit more with sort of the location and what I was seeing around the characters this time. But there's lots of this film that just not that it doesn't hold up. I think it does hold up, but that have aged, that are aging week, month, year by year by year, and eventually I think this film will feel even older and more worn than ever. Obviously the stop motion to do with the monkey rat thing and stuff like that, some of the effects really aren't very good, some of the acting is incredibly cheesy and hammy. How it's filmed, the style of it, the obnoxious way it's filmed, and sort of like some of the bad reads, all of this stuff does date it and does mean that as time goes by I'm finding myself enjoying it less and less. But the bar is still quite high with it. I think it is an incredibly entertaining horror film that my child self thought was a very super entertaining film, purely for the monstrosity of that it is, of all the different parts that come together. You know, I'm a kid, I'm laughing out lines out, I kick ass for the Lord and all stuff like that. Now I watch that, I'm cringing a little bit at those scenes, but then finding myself massively disturbed by the antics of him and the nurse when they're fucking dead. Like that stuff I know it's still supposed to be done in a comedic way, but the noises and the look and the chewing the lips off and the pulls for the stomach and the food, it's all just so goddamn gross. Maybe in my older age my stomach isn't what it used to be, but you know, it's a secret about me. I actually can't handle body horror very, very well. Things like cabin fever and all that, I have massive amounts of disturbing issues watching shit like this. It just turns my stomach. So there are elements of Braindead that I find do turn my stomach, but because it was always done in a very silly, over-the-top slapstick way, there was never any long-term sort of anti-watching it again. I've seen this movie loads, and I probably will see it a few more times before I think it reaches that point where it's just old and it no longer feels as important. But for now, it is Braindead. It is a beloved movie, and I think for all the right reasons, and I still think I sit on that side of the fence. Or Dead Alive. What do you reckon? You got any thoughts on this one? You know what to do. Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website where reviews, news and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at gbhbl. Just search for gbhbl and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.